well, I'd like to issue an apology. As some of you may know, yesterday Riot revealed Ambessa's full lore. Or at least the full lore leading up to Arcane, so don't worry, there are no spoilers for Arcane here. But that lore also reveals some of the things that were theorized in her previous cinematic. And specifically, yes, I know, I'm embarrassed about this, but I presented Ambessa being pregnant with Mel during all the battles as a possibility, and not a fact, despite the fact that she is visibly pregnant in the last shots of the cinematic. Yes, you can stop now, I'm gonna remember this far longer than you will. But thankfully, still about solid 70% of that video was about to hit. Though unfortunately, I am pretty sure all the possible connections to Xerath and Renekton are just gone. Man, that one would have been cool. The thing is, besides Ambessa's bio dropping on the universe, PBE also revealed the skin bios for all the Chosen of the Wolf skins. Which means, even though that entire part of the story is still kept vague, we got a better idea of what's happening there. So now, without further ado, let's have a look at the full story of Ambessa Medarda. Born into one of the most powerful families in modern Noxus, Ambessa Medarda was perhaps always destined for greatness. Her family was not counted among the old noble houses, yet they had gained immense respect and influence across the empire since its founding. And young Ambessa's first exposure to bloodshed came early, watching Reckoners risk their lives for a chance at glory in the arenas. Though she was too young to know the thrill of battles herself, she studied every match and internalized every move. Here we quickly have to mention one thing. The bio mentions that Ambessa was born into one of the most powerful families of modern Noxus. Which means that in the previous video I already fumbled one detail. To me, it always felt obvious that the golden colors of the Medarda clan would come from outside of Noxus. Which, if combined with the scenes from the past of Ambessa's cinematic, it felt like she should be originally from Shurima. That would simply make sense, but here it was directly confirmed that Ambessa was a Noxian from birth. So, what's really going on here? Well, thankfully the bio clarifies this a little bit better later on. So the original theory is not out of the window just yet. Anyway, let's continue. In the aftermath of the Battle of Hildenard, her father sent her to collect the blades of fallen soldiers. Though still a child, Ambessa never once averted her eyes from the death and carnage around her. And by the end of the day, she knew death was not something to be feared, but respected. Sacrifice was a noble thing. Greatness demanded it. This bit is a direct reference to a scene from the cinematic. There we saw young Ambessa surrounded by the blades that were mentioned in this story. So in reality, this was the scene where Ambessa learned that death was to be respected. And since here the story also mentioned that greatness demands sacrifice, well, that is exactly what happened with the lamb, which still represents Ambessa's past life of following the peaceful ways of the lamb. Which is where the story then gave us our first big reveal. The Medarda family code, passed down through generations since their earliest days as traders on the Shuriman coast, posed the virtues of both the desert fox and the fearsome wolf of legend. So it was no surprise that Ambessa would choose a soldier's life, carrying the memories of her childhood lessons with her always, holding others to the ideals of familial honor and decisive action. So, the interesting thing here is that while the Medarda family is a Noxian house, and Ambessa was born into it as a Noxian family, some people portray this as the Medarda family originally coming from Shurima, because the family also followed the Shuriman mythos. This would make sense because later in the Empire's life, Noxus expanded south and it started conquering the Shuriman shores, which would potentially turn a Shuriman family into a Noxian house. But that is not exactly what's happening here, and now I can say I was wrong. House Medarda was always a Noxian house, and the use of the golden colors just came from their ties to Shurima. So at least I was right on something. But the confirmation for this will arrive in just a second. But before we move on, there is one more thing that should be mentioned. Here the story mentioned that the Medarda family believed in the wolf of legend, referencing kindred, as well as the desert fox. The interesting thing is that the fox is a reoccurring legend. First of all, it is cool that Ambessa is actually referencing both of these in Arcane. She mentioned that they should be cunning as a fox and merciless as a wolf. So even in Arcane, Ambessa is paying tribute to her Shuriman ties. But if you're wondering where the fox was mentioned before, well, in the Ionian mythos, death is a three-part journey. You have to deal with the gatekeeper, the taker, and the collector. Or possibly just one of them, depending on what kind of a person you are. With all three of these being represented by different skins in the Spirit Blossom skin line. With Thresh being the collector, Kindred being the taker. So again, yes, this is the canonical version of Ionian Kindred. And Ari as the gatekeeper, who is also often referred to as the fox. So in Ionia, people believe in the legend of the fox. But besides that, Legends of Runeterra also revealed that this deathless spirit possibly originates from Targon. And given Shurima's history with Targon, this would make complete sense. Well, this was an interesting detour, so back to the story. She was a proud daughter of the Medardas, a born warrior, soon enough a general in command of several warbands. Clearly one of her grandfather Menelik's favorites as patriarch. And yet, she was so much more. A woman, a lover, and a mother. In her appetite for life, Ambessa experienced it all. But the moment she held her son Kino for the first time, she finally understood what it meant to devote herself to someone unconditionally. So, our first confirmation here is that Kino was Mel's older brother. In Arcane 1, we heard his name and we learned that he died, but outside of that, that's kinda it. Also, her simply experiencing life as a woman, a lover, and a mother, with an appetite for life, is likely what was shown in the second memory of the cinematic. It was the much more casual-ish side of her life. Anyway, the story then continues with what happened after she got to love her son unconditionally. And with that came the potential for profound disappointment. While she loved him dearly, it was clear that Kino would never have the strength of a warrior in his heart. Well, knowing he died, it all lines up. Not long after, Ambessa almost met her end in battle defending her ancestral home of Rokrund, while pregnant with her daughter Mel. I know, guys, please don't. As she lay among the bodies of her allies and foes alike, she drifted near death and experienced visions that she would speak of to few others in her lifetime. Whatever it was Ambessa had seen, it alloyed her resolve and ambition. She would bend the world to her will, so that any weakness in her children would not be something her enemies could exploit. Well, first it was confirmed that Ambessa was actually pregnant in the cinematic. And if you're wondering how is it possible that Mel was able to survive Ambessa being hit with an arrow in the stomach, well, it seems like Mel was also chosen by the wolf. Which means Kindred might be possibly giving Mel plot armor on purpose. But also, this part directly confirms that the previous cinematic was a canonical vision of Ambessa's near-death experience. And this part also broke Riot's funny streak. Because as I mentioned, up until this moment, every time Riot showed Noxians on a shore, it was always the Ionian shores, because it would be related to the invasion of Ionia. But now it was confirmed that these shores are Noxian, because this is happening after the battle for Rokrund, which, as was mentioned here, was Ambessa's ancestral home. Which I am pretty sure also directly confirms that the Medarda family is Noxian. And that's because Rokrund is a place we can find on the map. And not only is it found on Noxian soil, what's really cool here is that this place connects the immortal bastion of Noxus, it is right next to Piltover, and it connects to Belzoon, which is a big port city that Noxus conquered and which is being used to trade between Noxus and Shurima. We learned all of that from Talia's story. So if the Medarda family originates from Rokrund, then their trading history with Shurima explains why they are using the Noxian red and Shuriman gold. Anyway, the story then continues after what we have seen in the cinematic. From that moment, Ambessa's rise became almost meteoric. She led from the front in every battle, fearlessly staring death in the eye, and with every victory she grew more resourceful, more daring, and more uncompromising. When old Melik Medarda finally passed, he named no heir from his deathbed, sending several branches of the family into a conflict of succession. But Ambessa knew that they clawed at heir, for this was her destiny. I mean, she probably saw that in the visions. She defeated her rivals and vowed to forge a legacy worthy of the Medarda name, worthy of her own children's inheritance. As the new matriarch, Ambessa began to speak more often of her own personal mantra. In all things, be the wolf. Be ready to hear that at least once in Arcane 2. She would tolerate no weakness or dissent in those around her, lest the weakness spill over into her. She even sent her daughter Mel away to the distant city of Piltover. Years passed before Ambessa began to hear murmurs of a new powerful invention called hextech. From the soft-spined idealist of Piltover, no less. Intrigued by the potential of such discovery, Ambessa traveled to the Gilded City to visit her daughter, determined to find out if this technology could be used to leverage even more power for the Medarda family. So, this is how Ambessa's story led into Arcane. We just know that she sent Mel into Piltover so that Mel wouldn't be included in all the Noxian affairs. Though in the story, it really sounds like Ambessa just sent Mel away because she was weak. Which means that maybe Ambessa is not all about protecting her family rather than the Medarda name. In fact, this was always hinted when she appeared in Arcane 1. And of course, it all ends with her learning about hextech. Which is where I just really want to point out one more thing. Why is LeBlanc mentioned as a related character? What is LeBlanc planning to do with hextech?
Hey, this is awkward, but this is Necrit from the future. It just so happens to be that now, after I edited the video, if you go to Ambessa and you check out her lore, you may notice that LeBlanc is missing now. Take that information for what you will.
Well, that's pretty much it for Ambessa's bio. A simple story that pays a good tribute to Noxian history. But somehow that is not where the story ends. Because as I mentioned, besides Ambessa herself getting a story, we also got a short bio for all the wolf skins. So now we can learn a little bit about what happened in Ambessa's visions. First of all, an extra skin that was revealed to be part of the skin line is Kindred. Now, they look awesome! But they look nothing like what was shown in the cinematic. And I do believe that was just an aesthetic choice to sell the skin. But more importantly, here's the bio. Do you hunger, dear wolf? The eternal chase is almost upon us. For you and your followers who find bliss through battle, this hunt is their reward. Only those chosen to enter Volrachnun are granted this opportunity. Tell me, will they be able to withstand us in your afterlife? So, this skin essentially revealed that the characters we saw in the cinematic were other people who were challenged by the wolf. And it seems like they passed the wolf's challenge. After which, it seems like the wolf can use them, or at the very least their image, for what they refer to as the eternal hunt. Which seems to be just judging someone at the brink of death if they are worthy to live again. And yes, I know that all of this is still very vague, but at least it is steering us in some direction. And what's amazing is that we got a name for the real realm of death, or at least the realm that belongs to the wolf. It is Volrachnun, which is an awesome reference to Noxian history with death and Mordekaiser. You see, Mordekaiser taught us that the language of the dead is called Oknun, and Mordekaiser's own death realm is called Mitnarachnun, which is simply using the same vocabulary as Volrachnun, which is the death realm of the wolf, which, as was mentioned here, the wolf itself chooses who gets here. Pretty cool if you ask me. So next, let's have a look at Ambessa's skin. Your chosen has arrived, dear wolf. Those came before her paved the way for this moment. The Medardas will mourn the loss of her and her unborn child. And yet, I see a thread that ties her still to the living. Ambessa, the matriarch of war. Does her destiny lie in Volrachnun? So, this is a quote of the lamp where they are wondering if Ambessa is able to leave this realm. Well, the cinematic showed us that eventually she would. Now, I'm not really sure how canonical this is, but in the splash art of the skin you can see that Ambessa is skilling Noxian soldiers. And I wonder if this confirms that if you pass the wolf's test, then you can be used to test others. Because here it seems like Ambessa is being used to test the other dying Noxians. But more than that, since the lamp wonders if her destiny lies in Volrachnun, I wonder if that means that if you fail the test and the wolf beats you, then you stay in this realm. Which would suggest that, yeah, all of those actually failed the test. Man, I would really like to get some answers here. Anyway, of course, Ambessa fought the Pantheon skin in the cinematic. So now let's have a look at that one. Why was this spearman chosen, dear wolf? Did his spirit catch your eye? Or was it his steadfastness? Regardless, he has done what we asked of him. He was a worthy first test for the mighty Noxian general. What fate awaits him now? He will prove his worth once more and join the hunt. So yeah, this is where things get weird again. I mean, first of all, we were technically right in the fact that this is the wolf fighting Ambessa. Except here, it is a chosen warrior of the wolf fighting on the wolf's behalf. The lamp mentioned that the warrior did what they asked of him and he fought Ambessa. But then they talk about his fate and how he will be used to test others. Which again might mean that he failed the wolf's test, which actually might have been the warrior also being tested against Ambessa, and since he failed, he would stay in Volrachnun. But again, if that's the case, then the entire Ambessa skin is a real what-if scenario. It would be what if Ambessa failed and she stayed in the realm. Does this mean that as long as the wolf is using you for a test, you're kinda stuck in a limbo? It is obviously not happening in real time as you are just lying there on the battlefield. But is it possible that the wolf is holding on to the chosen warriors and using them to test the others as they die? That would explain why after Ambessa won, she was still used to test the others. If that's the case. Well, I like a good theory, but I'm getting confused here. But then, to stir everything up a little bit more, we also get the Katarina skin. An assassin was welcomed into our realm, dear wolf. Though she moves in shadows, she strikes fear in the hearts of her foes. That caught your attention, didn't it? Her speed, her violence, her conviction. A welcome addition to the eternal chase. So this is simply just another person that was dropped into the realm and was chosen by the wolf. The thing is, just like Pantheon, I strongly doubt this is supposed to represent Katarina herself. I do believe this is just a generic assassin. But I'm genuinely not sure if that's also the case for Swain. A usurper has joined us, dear wolf. A man who grasps for power far beyond his reach. He fails to see his folly. How will he adapt to his new surroundings now that he is no longer in control? We will be watching him closely as we give chase. See, here the story is being far too specific to fit Swain. But also the lamp mentioned that they will watch him closely and give chase. Which might mean that they know that Swain is on borrowed time, and knowing the demon's powers, it might be a matter of time before the demon takes over. At which point, the wolf gets the chance to strike him down. So this might actually be Swain specifically, but it may also be a generic, power-hungry man. And unfortunately, that is where everything wraps up. That's it for the bio of Ambessa, as well as all the bios of all the different skins. Did we learn anything about the cinematic and the visions? Not necessarily, everything is still vague. But overall, I am happy with what we learned from Ambessa's lore. Arcane wasn't spoiled, Ambessa got a really cool tribute to Noxian history, and Riot found a way to turn it all into a pile of money. Especially since Ambessa's release skin is gonna be a legendary. And speaking of ways of turning a story into a pile of money, There is one more skin in this skin line that also got a story. An esteemed warrior and strategist, Swain brings his refined taste and unparalleled attire to both the hunt and the gala. Menacing and dignified with a dash of disdain, his competition fears him when he hits the runway. Although he'll do whatever it takes to secure his victory, he lets onlookers know that fashion is what really matters. Yeah, I don't think this one is canon.